doesn't know. Simple example is in my last job at eBay, where we integrate with 8-9 vendors on an e-commerce project. And one of the vendor gave us web services. And then people started using that in dev and QA. What they did, they just opened up a port to make it work. And ops were never aware of this. Finally, it went to production. Before going to production, ops said, oh, we cannot open up the port. We have firewall. It's secure, things like that. So those things get discovered very late in the project. So the other one is frequency. As Saurav mentioned earlier, we have reduced our timeline. People used to do 4-week sprint. Now, even in our office, we brought down to 2 weeks. Sometimes we do even 1-week sprint on a maintenance mode of our product. So agility has been increased, and there's more of challenges for developers. And let's see what are the challenges operations have these days. So operations have to stick to compliance. They have so many security regulations. They have to watch for hackers. They have to make sure that their product works they have to make sure the product works with very high performance. And operation doesn't have lack of knowledge what gets into their environment. Because of that, what they do is they are scared to put anything new into their environment, and they're also scared to do frequent deployments because they want the environment to be stable. So developers want agility, ops want stability. So let's get a little bit deeper into this. As I said, I'm going to skip through this culture pretty fast. And some of the things that can help getting rid of this culture differences between dev and ops is, have a fine defined process where you can establish an advocate within your company. And you can also adopt like collective ownership, because earlier, ops think they throw things over the wall and we just collect it and deploy it. But it's a collective ownership. Right from beginning, ops are part of the team. We should get them buy into your project or product that you're planning to deploy. And it's a collective ownership between them. So we have to establish that. And then next one is mutual benefits, because once it goes to production. Yes.
Sorry, a basic question.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't have much idea on DevOps. Like I can tell I don't have any idea on DevOps. Like when you're referring to ops team, like what are the stakeholders that you're referring as ops team?
Stakeholders are like your release managers, people who take your deployable code and they deploy into your production environment.
Okay.
So they are like stakeholders.
Okay.
So those can be admins. Every company has, in our office, we have called release engineering.
Okay.
Their job is to take code and deploy. Their job is to build production code, things like that.
Okay.
So it varies between companies. So they are purely admin kind of people. Did I answer your question?
Yep.
So next one is focus on mutual benefit, because dev doesn't want to stay overnight and fix when it's getting deployed into production. At the same time, ops don't want to be in 24/7 looking at a performance issue or server going down frequently because of a bad code or bad configuration. So between themselves, if they come to an understanding where we help each other, that also helps some of the hurdles. And breaking silos in the team is very much I mentioned earlier. And then the last one is the benefit. So dev and ops, if you are able to establish where you can say, if you have a fine defined good code and my SLA is well established and I can do 99.9, that way ops are buying in. Same thing, you can get them together by showing the value that they get into the business, how successful your customers are, and things like that will get them together. That's how some of the culture differences can be broken down between dev and ops. So let me get into the streamline SDLC. So at CollabNet, what we do is we include, as I mentioned, ops all the way from the beginning of the release. So we have like a ops backlog. If you look at this picture, where you have a product development on the left-hand side and the operations on the right, where you have product backlog, you have many sprints. You go through the sprint, you release a product. When the product goes to production, ops monitors those products. They come up with their own requirement. They come up with performance issues, and we have to upgrade to certain software, certain version, because that has vulnerability issues resolved, things like that. So in our case, these are few things, I just gave as an example, where ops came up, they started giving some requirements as through the feedback loop, if you look at it here, where ops also, since ours is a product development company, ops also does the installation of our product. They also found usability issues on our product. If customer installs the same product, how difficult it will be for the customer. So we get the feedback through that gets into our backlog, and then that gets into a couple of sprints or releases. So that's how we operate. And then once we get the stories, we also have POs collaborating with ops to define the story well, because some of the stories are very technical. Product owners may not be able to write it on their own. And anyway, as Scrum says, development team, everybody are involved in part of writing stories. Same thing with DevOps story, where ops are involved in writing your stories. So a few other things. Once ops stories are done, ops are also involved in sprint reviews. So if it's an ops story, what they do is at the end of the story, it's not the product owner who validates the story, it's also ops. Ops takes our product, they install it themselves, and then if somebody wants to migrate from older version of our product to a newer version, ops also does the same. They do it themselves during the end of the sprint. And then if there are any new products we are trying to integrate and that needs a separate server, and that also they try it out. Good example is last year we integrated with a third-party product, and that product needs a separate server, not part of our application stack. It needs 4-core 8 GB box. And then what happened is in dev, it was all in one box developed, and then finally, before going to stage, they realized that the vendor says it has to be always on 4-core 8 GB. So things like that comes up very early in your sprint if you're able to include them ahead of time. And we also have configuration in our application. Every release we add new features. Some of the features can be turned on and off. That typically never gets tested because customer has different flags they turn on and off across multiple customers. So ops also does that the way customer does by turning on and off certain features. Some of them can be even mostly like configuration, where some customers use LDAP, some customers use different authentication mechanism. All those ops are the good ones to test. That also gives us very stable environment. And then ops also qualifies some of the administrative documents we give to our customers, because it's administrative document where you have various softwares involved. In our product, we use up to maybe 25 to 30 open source involved in our product. So there may be so many versions, we have to look at compatibility. So ops look at the admin documents, see how customers are deployed, and see how it can be adjusted before going live. And the last one is ops also, once it's deployed, it doesn't work, they also have a snapshot and rollback recovery that also they tested, so that if customer upgrades due to some reason, they want to roll back, ahead of time we test it, so we recommend our customers how you can roll back. So ops have that as part of their story. The last one is security and audit history. Whoever does this kind of qualification, they have an audit. So ops captures all those information, and they're able to use that so that only certain people can do some of this security and the last one is a smoke test. Every time when ops moves to an environment, they have their own acceptance criteria, like your story acceptance criteria. Ops have their own acceptance criteria, where they install it, they also configure this. If the acceptance criteria doesn't fail, they come back, make changes to the story. Story gets reopened. So let's get into the next one, which is visibility through release and pipeline. As I mentioned earlier, it's a traceability. So what people do is they typically develop all the way. You have continuous integration that runs test, and then end of the day, you have a product. But beyond that, many companies don't continue, other than big ones like e-commerce companies may be continuing it. So traceability is very important, and that gives you very well in what environment, in what stage environment, what production environment, what version of the build you have that's tied to what release. This traceability has to be established. And then the next one is metrics. So people typically have metrics again towards Agile. So that has to be extended all the way up to your ops and even to your business metrics. As I mentioned earlier, you have business goals. So ops also have their goals where some of the metrics, they want to include it as part of their dashboard. So those can be established, and it's again, custom by company. I cannot prescribe some metrics because it's again, depending upon your project or your product. If you're a services company, you may have different metrics driven by the customer and different SLAs. And the next one is modes of communication. So as the story goes by, sometimes ops gets pulled off, they're on their own tangent. So in our case, what we have is we have few dedicated folks who are involved in certain stories, certain sprints, and they are the ones throughout the release. If the release is over 3-4 months, and if you have 5-6 sprints, same folks are involved throughout the sprint, throughout the release, so that we have continuity, and we also know how they are progressing, and they'll also understand better. So we have some of these practices we follow in our office. So this is a simple picture that describes how your ALM and DevOps get together. If you look at left-hand side, where you have a typical sprint where you do plan, code, build, and you have continuous integration, and on the right you have deploy, and then you have operations. And I'm again describing where, as part of your continuous integration release, you're building your product for various platforms. That's what I'm trying to show here. So let's get a little bit deeper into automation and tools. Why we need automation and tools? Because some of the things are more agile, and we don't have time to do all these things through a manual step. And second thing that happens in one of the biggest problem in Agile is in a 2-week sprint, a lot of things get developed, but finally during last few days, there's more testing work that needs to be done because there's less testing work at the beginning of a release. These are some of the bottlenecks which can be solved through your tools. And then you also need tools where various environment, let's say if you're deploying to dev, QA, production, you may have a directory structure in QA where you may have home/QA. In your production, you may have home/prod, things like that. If you have tool that can dynamically substitute things, which will be really helpful for you, rather than have a documentation and then and who can perform each action. That is a security part in your workflow. And it also has role-based access and approval. You can go directly, you can define a workflow where you can deploy automatically to dev, QA, but if it's going to stage, you can have a guy approve it. Until it's approved, it cannot go to stage. And you can also do the same for production. So last part is model. What model means is, workflow is again a static thing, and model has all the information where which node it has to deploy, where configuration has to be changed. As I mentioned, your directory structure differences between each environment are all defined in a model. So this is a simple picture I have here where it's going to show how all these three are linked together. Your ALM, your provisioning box, as well as your release automation. So top part, what you see is your ALM tool, where you have sprint and you have stories, you have products, and then you go sprint over sprint, and then finally you have continuous integration, which builds, and then with packages, and then it can package for various OS. So you have different packages. In our case, we use CentOS, RHEL, SUSE, VMware, so we package differently, different ways for different platforms. And then let's get into the profile, which is like typically provisioning boxes into dev, test, QA. What profile means? We have standard profile. So if you look at 5-10 years ago, where if you want a dev box, people typically write up a ticket for ops. They create a dev box, they create a QA box. Tomorrow somebody else asks for a QA box, it will be slightly different. There may be versions in your JDK, there may be versions in OS. In our case, we have standard profile. Whoever in the company builds any environment for that particular release, we have a standard profile by operating system. If you want a RHEL for this release, you go to our tool and pull RHEL, and then you can say, this is a release, it gives you a standard profile. So everybody in the company have the same profile. That's biggest advantage. and it eliminates a lot of issues. So if you look at it, dynamically dev goes, provisions boxes, and then similar, dev always develops on CentOS, so they are okay, they develop it. But in the case of QA guys comes in, he provisions the box, beginning of the day, it takes 5 minutes to provision our box, but QA tests on various platforms, CentOS, Red Hat, SUSE, things like that. So they provision a box. And we also have another thing called early release environment, where once in few sprints, we deploy certain things to early release, lack of a name, that's what we call, where our customers logs in and looks at our features, some of the existing customers. And they also provide feedback, which again Agile talks about, providing feedback from the customer. So we do this not at the end of a release, we do it between every 2 or 3 sprints. And the last one is, again, ops uses the same profile. So right from beginning to end, we are using the same set of tools, same set of add-ons that goes into our environment, and they are all in sync. So let's see how release automation fits into this picture. So as I mentioned, workflow, it pulls packages from what has been built. And let's say if you want to deploy a product into your QA environment, so you have defined it in your workflow, yes?
Is it the type of beta testing that you do over there? What are you concentrating on?
Early release is something, a new feature we show to our customer and ask for their feedback.
So is it a beta testing? Like, are they your real customers or?
No, they are real customers.
They are real.
Customers who are in Europe and US who use our product, they log in, they have an account in our early release environment. They log in and then we do a demo. First, show them at the end of every 2 sprints, we show them, and then they log in and then they play with it and give us feedback. What is it? This is an internal release, but our customers, they have their own environment. We have dedicated environment for our customers to log in and use them. Did I answer? That's right?
It's called an early drop.
Yeah, you can call that too. The early release?
No, the tool, what are you working?
Our ALM tool, we also have a cloud version. People with smaller employers, if you have a very small team of 20, 30, 40, you can use our cloud. And once you are at a point where you want to go to an enterprise level, we have a way to migrate from cloud to your own environment. You can install it in your own office and use it. DevOps is not provided as a service. ALM is provided as a service. DevOps, I think industry hasn't been matured enough where there are a lot of challenges. If you put it in cloud, people don't want to expose some of the internals of your...
Exploration stage, but maybe in the next couple of years.
That's maybe evolving because we have our whole ALM in our cloud. You can use our cloud or you can buy our software and install it in-house. But on the DevOps side, we have current customers who are in-house customers. They buy it and install it on their own.
Sir, I have one question.
Sure.
You have early release and production. So what will be the duration from early release to production?
We are in product development, so different domain. So our product is released every 6 months.
Okay.
And then early release is just what to say? We are not giving it to our customer just to play with it. We are not installing it in our customer box. So that happens. If you say every 2 sprints, it happens every month. So you may have 4 early releases, which customers will see and give us feedback, but they are not installing into their environment yet until we have official release. That is 6 months. So let me go through this pretty fast. So workflow pulls the packages, it uses a model, as I mentioned earlier. So it knows in test environment, all the things are deployed in one box. So it deploys it in one box. Same case, if you want to deploy to production, our workflow pulls it and it needs approval process. So you build your workflow so you had approval process. And your model knows your code has to be deployed into 2 boxes because your production is clustered. So that's how you can manage using DevOps. All these things are kind of automated where you can do this. So let me tell you this part, since we are in a product development and we have our things hosted in cloud or on premises, we are not following the DevOps internally. We use ALM, we use provisioning for our development, because when we deploy into our cloud, we need downtime from each customer. So that didn't work, that doesn't work out well. So I had to use the term what Srinivas said, DevOps but. So we don't use release automation for our own purposes. That's why that particular thing I'll just explain to you about a case study of one of our customers. So there's a large bank in Hong Kong who has so many environments. They are typically traditional, where they have, people call it as system integration environments. They are not into modern world. So they have like 5-6 different environments, not just dev, test, QA. And then they have, you can see here, SIT, UAT, production, and they have more actually, they have 6 or 7. And then most of the time, they spend a lot of time doing things manually. If you see, they have 70 applications, 2 to 3 people spending 45 minutes, and then average, they spend almost, 80 hours a week to deploy some of the J2EE application. So one of the biggest challenges, there's a longer downtime. So if you want to deploy 80 application over a period of, all in one day, so they have downtime of 6 to 12 hours, and they cannot afford. But when I was in eBay, for every hour downtime, a company, it used to cost $1 million, because they don't sell during that 1 hour time. So some of the critical things some of the customers face, where they need like 10 minutes downtime, 15 minutes downtime. So this can be solved by your DevOps tools or release automation. Let me see, once this customer, once they use the release automation tool, what are the things that happen? They got the traceability. That's one of the key things, where they know what releases, what builds, what got deployed. They have traceability of the tool. And they also get, automatic notification, things like the tool does, not just release automation, but it also does more than that. And they also have standard process, where today, I deploy, tomorrow somebody else does it. It's all in the workflow. And you change it in one place in your workflow, and tomorrow you want to add 3 more boxes to your production. You just change it in one place in your workflow, in a model, saying I want to deploy 3 boxes tomorrow, and this is a 3rd node, and everything else is same. It seamlessly deploys, and you don't have to worry about manually deploying in 3 boxes. So after introducing release automation, our customers took only 8 hours per week. So